Thank you, distinguished senators, for all those questions, all excellent questions. And I would like to again combine them with the kind permission of Your Excellency, the Senate President. One of the running themes is attracting investments. Let me say that the last 21 years of my career has been focused on attracting investments. Admittedly, it's been in the private sector, but I can assure you it's as hard to do in the private sector as it will be to do in the public sector. What is at the heart of it is basically that if one is going to attract investment from other parts of the world, we have to recognize some ground rules or truths. The first one is that we are in competition with other destinations. So most people will invest in places where they see that they will get a return, not necessarily because of a moral obligation or some other obligations. And the world is moving away from aid and more towards trade and investment. So I think the points that were made about making our nation an attractive destination for investment is a good one. Fortunately, we have many things going for us. For instance, the demographics and the population. Most people know that a lot of investments feed off people. I mean, the number of people you have. That's why Nigeria is called the giant of Africa. We are the largest population by a wide margin, and we are also a fast-growing population. Those are the things that are music to the ears of investors. They want to hear the consumer story, as they call it. So I believe that we can attract investment. And this is particularly true for health, which was the first question. That if you look at health, the nature of health is that no nation can say it's truly developed if its health care has to be delivered outside. The same thing is true of education, by the way. So I believe that with the number of people we have, we just have to create the kind of environment where even our own healthcare experts, doctors, nurses, because a lot of health has to do with the training and the quality of the healthcare professionals, are able to work in this environment, whatever it would take to attract them, I think is important. Then you talk about the facilities. I'm a great believer in the partnership that can develop between the public sector and the private sector. And that includes that for the private sector, what they want is a profit motive. For the public sector, what they want is a social safety net or social services to the people. And those two things can coexist. And I have coexisted in other climes and other parts of the world. So my view is for us to create an enabling environment that will make investments come in, where for those that are investing in the private sector, they can earn a fair return, and then from the point of view of government, given the limited resources we have, and both in terms of money and people, we are drawing resources both externally and internally. And I believe that as we signal to the world that we're a friendly destination and that we will not be hostile to their investments in our country, I believe that you will find that many of them will come, wanting to invest here. Already in my private sector career, I've had many instances where I discuss with many people from all over the world, both from the US, from India, where all the medical tourism go, and from Europe, who want to invest in this place. And in fact, one of my classmates who is still practicing told me that he believes that the amount of investment that will go into healthcare in Nigeria over the next 10 years will be enormous. And that's a view I share. I want to then use that to get to the next question around the automobile industry, which again is dealing with investment, but now linked to technology and moving from what I call looking back to looking forward. My view is that the point that distinguished Senator Ben Bruce made about technology is very important. That the world is increasingly technology driven. We live in a world that is driven by the forces of globalization, technology, and the flow of information in a way that no nation can truly develop without being immersed or being part of this new world we live in. And I believe again that Nigeria has the population to attract the best in class when it comes to technology, whether it's automobile. I think a lot of it has to do with the kind of arrangements we enter into, which is why I believe that a government that is truly ethical and responsible and that brings in people who have the competence ought to be able to negotiate and enter into the kind of arrangements that will bring the best. There's no reason why we should be playing second fiddle or getting things that are substandard in our country, given the enormous negotiating power and leverage we have. And I believe that this government will ensure that we get the best because we know what the best represents, and we will be able to negotiate it. And that will include technology and making sure that even in the automobile industry we'll go forward. And I think also, as it relates to the issue of shared prosperity, there is no question that all these things are interwoven. If you create an enabling environment and cars are being assembled here, industry is growing, then it will create employment, and of course the services will also be used. By the way, let me also say that these trends are already in place. It's just that are not happening fast enough. My view is that like we need more of an enabling environment to speed up the trend in terms of investment, because that's really what we lack given the population we have. The next question has to do with foreign exchange and foreign exchange management. In my opening comments, I said that one of the areas that one has to look at is the kind of policies that will create an enabling environment for you to achieve inclusive growth, shared prosperity, and employment. And there is no question that foreign exchange management is one of the monetary policies that a country has available to it to use. Like all such things, you have to weigh what I call the different factors at work in foreign exchange management. On the one hand, for those that want to see a currency that is weaker, what they are saying is that like if you weaken your currency, then it is easier for you to create export, an export environment. However, you have to create all the enabling environment to export. If, for instance, we're exporting only crude oil right now, and we haven't done enough to create an environment for industry and for other things you can export, you may find that like your foreign exchange policy may run ahead of some of the other policies. I'm a great believer that like all these things have to work in consonance, in synergy, to create the right environment. I can understand why, and also in managing, I've had, for instance, the government talk about demand management of foreign exchange. But supply management is also important. In other words, by supply management, I mean those things that will create more foreign exchange. Because if you try to manage the demand side alone without managing the supply side, what will happen is that if the supply keeps dwindling, then you will keep managing down, and you could actually get into a catch-22, where you don't have enough foreign exchange to produce the goods and services that you need, in order for the economy to grow. So my view is that we have to look at this holistically and create an enabling environment where people actually want to invest their money, because that's how the foreign exchange flows in. By inviting it in, that creates the supply, which in turn you can then make available to those who demand foreign exchange. And I think this can be done. I believe that the government has enough levers to work with to create a robust supply of foreign exchange by attracting foreign exchange investments, and then, of course, making supply available for those that want to import. Now, I was also asked the question around, people, how will you be people responsive by distinguished Senator Remi Tinubu? How will you respond? How will you be responsive in terms of people and making sure that like you're not in isolation as it were from the people, whether it's from Abia or from other states or the nation at large? I mean, my sense, just watching what we have seen in the last several months, is that like the government we have is a government that is very keen to bring the people into the economy and to get the benefits of governance for the people. And in inviting people like us, I believe that we'll fully identify with that. In other words, what we'll be looking at, and I'm not saying it's easy to do these things, will be what are those policies that will create shared prosperity? What are those policies that will create employment? What are those policies? And are not far-fetched. I mean, you have to look at infrastructure. There is no question that if you invest in your future, which is what infrastructure is really, you create growth over time. But if you invest only in consumption, or if you're spending all the money you get, then you get into a diminishing return situation. We also have to look at, like I said, at favoring and supporting those initiatives and industries and sectors that would attract employment, because employment in itself is a major problem. When you talk about people being responsive to them, what do they want? They want to have jobs to do, and they want to be part of the economy. They want to be integrated into what is happening rather than watching from the sidelines. The final thing I would say is that no nation develops on its own. It's very important that we are an environment that is positive for investors to come and invest. And I believe that many people would like to invest in Nigeria if we will welcome them. And I believe that our president has already shown it, and this government will show that we are prepared to partner with the international community to build a great Nigeria. I was asked about the Southeast economy. My sense about the Southeast economy is that the Southeast economy needs a lot of support, but even more so does the Northeast economy, and so does a number of other parts of it. So my sense is that we have to create the kind of enabling environment for each of those sectors of the economy. So if you look at the Southeast, I know that the president the other day was in Cross River State to launch, to launch like a road that was going to be constructed that would help improve ships and a port facility there, and also attract more investment and activities in that part of the world. That's how one attracts, helps an economy to grow. So I believe each of the regions of Nigeria should be made a cluster. and activities should happen around those clusters so that everybody is not migrating to just one particular place in the entire economy. And we will need that in the Southeast, we need that in all the regions of the economy. I think the final question I would like to address is the question around bottom-up economic growth and creating rural development. And I would say that the answers are very similar. One is to make sure that each of the regions have things that make them attractive, to invest in. And that we invest in those regions by creating infrastructure in each region. Because what tends to attract things away from regions is that when they don't have the facilities, then people go to where those facilities are. And I also believe that as the various governments at the state level and the local level also want to attract investment, which is what I'm seeing across board, you will find that we'll create a healthy competition for investors, to travel around the country rather than staying in just one part of the country.
Senator Chief